So as we all know, the block was created in order to save Japan in the world of soccer and make an overwhelming striker that can win them the U20 World Cup. But in this video, I'll go over why they need to do this in the first place, and I'll give a few examples of who exactly the system failed. But before we begin the video, I'd obviously like to ask you if you enjoy the video to make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, since I make block content quite often and it's pretty high quality. Now to begin this video, we have to go over what exactly Japan excels at and what Japan fails at. According to Jinpachi Ego, Japan's soccer teamwork capability is the best in the world, but besides that, everything else is second rate, and it's because their way of thinking is thinking soccer is a sport which 11 people combine their power and treasuring their bonds or for the sake of their friends. And the reason that they've always been so weak in this sport is because they don't realize that soccer is a sport in which you score more points than your opponent. Nothing more, nothing less. The first person in block to ever speak out against this mindset is Kira, but as we see, he was one of the first people that were kicked out, so his mindset doesn't really hold any results like Ego's does. But to continue on, we see that all the best strikers in the world and the leading scorers all think that they're the best of their time and think that they would rather score points than do anything else on the field. And according to Ego, this isn't just some random coincidence. You can only be the world's top scorer or striker if you're the world's top egoist. And this leads us to our first victim of the system, Isagi Yoichi. Isagi is one of the characters in Blue Lock that was actually born with an innate spatial awareness that was above many others his age. He had quite amazing eyesight that he could see mosquitoes from far distances away, and he was sensitive to changes in the sky, which made it so he knew when it was going to rain. But aside from this, he was also born with his amazing direct shot skill, which would lead you to believe that he has the capabilities of being a good striker. And while that may be true, there are quite a bit of things that happened to him that made him not want to be this way, at least before entering Blue Lock. In this novel, we're also able to see when Ego and Henri are looking at the footage of Isagi's game, and as soon as Isagi goes to hug his teammate who just missed the goal from his pass, Henri just stops the video and says he's not a good striker. But while watching the footage, Ego's able to see that Isagi moves totally systematically and can tell he's definitely talented. And against Henri's judgment, he decides that he wants to invite Isagi to Blue Lock. Ego claims that even though Isagi has an amazing eye and high soccer IQ, he's a gem that's killed his potential as a striker by using all his talents for his team. And as you'd expect, Ego's completely right, and we get to see this in a little bit of the manga, but mostly the novel. Now we obviously know that Isagi wanted to be like Noah Onoa, the #1 striker in the world. But do you remember that team that Isagi was on in high school? Well, what you may not have known or picked up is that their slogan is actually one for all and all for one. You can actually catch him saying this in the game that Isagi played, which lets him passing the ball to his teammate and losing the game. But this goes even deeper in the novel. According to this novel, after the team's practice, Isagi on a whim goes to his coach and tells him that he wants to go into the next game as a striker and score more goals. And I kid you not, the entire team, including Isagi's coach, just started laughing out loud. The coach basically calls him naive and tells him that they plan to go to nationals and they can't win games by one player alone. This greatly impacted Isagi and made him very embarrassed, but this novel actually says that his ego was sealed from that day on. One instance where we see this ego being sealed firsthand is when he passes the ball to Kunigami in front of the goal against Baro's team, and he says he does it instinctively. And that's just because Isagi at this time didn't have a mindset of a striker, but in the current series he's been working towards and progressing his ego ever so slightly. But the fact that this interaction actually made Isagi's ego wither is actually pretty insane, and is a first-hand showing of how Japan's soccer curriculum is failing. And don't worry, I have many more examples. And this is why when Ego basically confirmed to Isagi that his mindset was right the whole time, he was the very first person to run into Blue Lock, because this is literally what he dreamed of, but up until now, he just didn't think it existed. But we all see how Isagi's been evolving in the current state of this manga, but imagine if Isagi never got his ego sealed and still went to Blue Lock. Like if Isagi never joined that team, it is possible that Ego would have never seen him, but it's also possible that he would probably be a world-class formidable striker as of now. But sadly, all it takes is one bad coach in order to destroy you. Now the next person I wanted to go over in this video is Aiku. Aiku, as we know him now, is an amazing defender and Japan's best defender, matter of fact, but it wasn't always that way. And if you're wondering what Aiku was before he was a defender, well, I'll tell you. Aiku, as well as the Blue Lockers, also started off as a striker, and in fact he was pretty good and known as a prodigy. But his coaches, much like Isagi, always used the phrase for the team or for someone else, that's just not him. And almost as if the mangaka was trying to parallel Isagi and Aiku, Aiku also goes up to his coach and tells him that he wants to be a striker and shoot more, but the coach just tells him that soccer is a team sport, and Aiku won't be allowed in the games if he can't play by the rules. And Aiku in these flashbacks actually gives kind of a perfect description for what Japanese soccer is doing. Because they all have the same mindset of play for the team and one for all and all for one, Every single one of the players ever produced from Japan played the same, and as Aiku puts it, when they bloomed, they all became identical flowers. And before he knew it, he'd forgotten how to bloom, which led to him not enjoying the game anymore since he wasn't playing the way he wanted to. This leads to him questioning if he can even become one of the world's best strikers at the age he's at now. And even though he isn't old, he's just been playing defense for so long and assisting players for so long, it might be too hard. He straight up tells his coach that he doesn't believe he can become the world's best striker anymore, and the him who believed he could died before he even realized it. But since he put an end to his life as a striker, he decided to try and become the world's best defender. And this time, he doesn't plan to leave behind any of his ego. But he also vows to himself that if someday a true striker appears and tries to blossom in this country, that he won't pluck that bud. And he wants to be the sort of man who can reach out a hand and say blossom. This clearly shows why Japan is failing at a core level in soccer when they try to force their ideals onto other people. To kind of add on the Aiku part, because I don't really know where to put this part, you could kind of argue that all of the defenders in the U20 game that are on the Japan team also may have had their ego stopped. Because if you think about it, Neru basically does the same thing as Shikiri does, but on a defense. And Kazuma, while having amazing physical strength, could have been like Tokumitsu or Adam Blake, having amazing physical strength while also being a striker. And finally, Darai just basically does the same thing Otoya does, but on a defensive level as well. Now, maybe not all of them were meant to be strikers, but you could argue that they might have been in a position where they were forced to play defense. But just to clarify, none of that's conclusive. It's just a guess made by me. But anyways, I know I'm not the only one that would be interested to see a striker Aiku play, and I'm sure it's even possible that he may score in the current game of the Ubers versus the Germany match. While it is quite unlikely, an ego awakening from Aiku would be a top 5 moments in block for me probably. Now the next person I wanted to go over here is probably going to be a short entry on this list, but it's going to be actually surprisingly Rin. Now Rin Itoshi needs no introduction. He's always been talented at soccer, playing with his brother Sei Itoshi at a high level at such a young age. They were basically undefeatable whenever they got on the field together, since Sei had amazing analytical abilities and passing skills, and Rin was just naturally good at shooting. Most of this content does come from the novel as well, but don't worry, these novels are 100% canon and approved by the writer of Blue Lock. 6 months after Sei left for Spain, Rin was left to fill the hole that was Sei on his team, but because of how Rin and Sei played, neither the coaches or Rin's teammates knew what he had going on in his head, and they couldn't really track his plays at all. And the only reason Sei and Rin were able to play together like they were for so long was because Sei was such a genius that Rin could just share images with him without even saying a word. And this brings him to the realization that no one in the world can really replace Sei. And that's why in the 6 months that Sei was gone, Rin could never even produce one goal. And even he realizes that even if he trains his shooting accuracy, it doesn't really matter if he can't score a goal, since a striker without goals isn't a striker at all. 2 years after Sei left, his team started getting mad at Rin since he wasn't really doing anything for the team and he couldn't fill the hole that was Sei Itoshi. And before we continue, we have to understand that Rin's born abilities are geared towards scoring goals himself. Just keep that in mind. But in this novel, he decides that instead of aiming towards, which he's been doing, he'll play so his team can reach a goal, sacrificing his ego and changing his playstyle, much like Isagi and Aiku. But shifting this playstyle did make Rin's team better. It made him as a striker much worse, since during every play, he has to hold back the him that's trying to steal a goal from his teammates. But this team and the condition that Rin was put in is actually what gave Rin the ability to control his teammates like a marionette, the same way he did to Bachira in the actual manga. And furthermore, because of Rin's passes, he's able to bring the most out of his teammates' capabilities, and they play without even realizing that he's stringing them on basically. And there's kind of this chaotic relationship between Rin and the team, whereby Rin abandoning his growth as a striker, the level of the team was raised to a whole new height. But even though Rin is playing as he is, he notices that he still wants to be a striker and acknowledges this, and that the Japanese like to see players that can play for the whole team instead of themselves, rather than showing off their individual skills like an ace striker would. But there is one moment in this novel where Rin is driven by his impulses. When thinking back to his time playing with Sei, Rin's ego flares up once more, and since he'd been reading headlines all over talking about how Sei scored for Real Madrid, he thought to himself that he wanted to score as well. And at this time, the strings that were once tied to his teammates snapped, and his egotistical plays start once again. And Rin, instead of passing like he usually does, keeps the ball to himself and begins going through the defense of the other team. And according to the narrator, this was the type of play that was supposed to be sealed, and one that was only meant to get one player a goal. This egotistical type of play is the forbidden ego of Japan. But there is one time when he passes, and as soon as he does, he begins bolting for the goal once again. And the look that he gave his teammate who had the ball is one that I can't even describe, so I'll just quote it straight from the novel. Rin's eyes were filled with a bloodlust that he had never seen before. He was overwhelmed by the heat that burned in him, which he could not imagine from the usually cool Rin. And under the pressure of Rin's gaze and the defense of the other team, Rin's teammate passed the ball to him. And at this moment, Rin made a very familiar face, sticking his tongue out and concentrating, using his impulses to guide him, scoring an amazing goal and winning the game for his team. And after 4 years of holding himself back, he had 3 minutes to release his ego. And those 3 minutes led to his team becoming known as the best in Japan. Now, knowing all this, it kind of makes sense why Rin responded the way he did when Sei told him that he wanted to be a midfielder. I mean, it doesn't make sense why Rin, being a striker himself, wouldn't want someone in the midfield that would be able to pass him goals like he was able to when they were kids. But at this point, it's very possible that Rin just wants to be very careful and doesn't want to lose this ego that he still has, so he doesn't want anything to change whatsoever, and he wants them both to be the ace strikers of their team. But what if I told you Rin and Itoshi's brother Sei Itoshi was also a victim to this system? Well, in the Rin novel, we actually get some idea that Sei may have been holding him back the same way that Rin was while leading his team. But this also raises the question, is Sei Itoshi really a bad brother? If we go with the information we're given, we can conclude that Sei may be doing everything he's done to Rin in order to make his ego flare up even more and to not give up his ego as a striker like Sei once did. But that's a topic for another day. What we can clearly conclude from this video is that Japan's soccer system is not working at all whatsoever and has only failed the people that has tried to help. The Japanese soccer system absolutely hates individuality and only supports players that will help their entire team rather than players that can actually produce goals. But there is one man in the world that can actually save Japan's soccer, and that is of course Jinpachi Ego. If you can't tell by now, Jinpachi Ego is only interested in players who can make and produce goals or players who can vastly impact the field at all. And we see that the way he's been training these players has been working thus far. I mean, most of them are able to compete at a U20 level and even beat the U20 of Japan team. And we see that overseas with the Masters, they've been having unprecedented levels of evolution. Whether you like it or not, in Blue Lock, Ego Jinpachi is going to be a name that takes over the world of soccer, and he may even be known as the best coach in the world. But that's all I have for today. If you enjoyed the video, of course make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, and go check out some more of my videos. You can also comment down below some topics you'd like to see me go over in the future down below. But yeah, goodbye.